Thank you. I'm Alex Walker, and I'm with LA Greens. The greatest, and I asked this question before, the greatest political challenge, I think, in the state of California, even for the establishment parties, is California's immense diversity. And I wish you guys, and I know Laura's had very direct experience dealing with this, and I also know a little bit about the history of why the Massachusetts Green Party became the Massachusetts Green Rainbow Party. I would like you guys to comment a little bit on how to address the challenge of our diversity and how to deal with the what I say, the lies that have been told about the Green Party in certain communities of color, and how you counter that without falling into the trap that I sometimes do. I confess, I sometimes get loud and a little bit pushy in my Green Party partisanship. So, I really know the techniques that you use to get down that problem in a nice way that's firm but effective.
Great, and you know, that's a really critical challenge. I think in many ways that's the challenge of the nation. You know, as a diverse nation, diversity sort of becomes the victim of you know, of this predatory economy that we have, and this, you know, sort of plutocracy, oligarchy, whatever you want to call it, where the powerful rule. And there's this terrible convergence of racial and cultural disparities with economic exploitation. And, you know, and so we're in a position now where communities of color used to have on average, or the average family of color, Latino or African American family, used to have 10 cents on the dollar for every white family, for the average white family. It used to be 10 to 1. And over the last 6 years or so, you know what happened to that 10 to 1? It became 20 to 1. The 10 cents on the dollar dropped down to 5 cents on the dollar, in part because unemployment hit low income and communities of color hardest, and also because the housing crisis hit low income communities. I saw a staggering statistic the other day. I think it was actually from like the Federal Reserve or from the Pew Trust. You know, it had just impeccable credentials to it. But that statistic was that in the economic wipeout of the last several years, communities of color lost on average 90% of their accumulated wealth, largely because of the housing crisis. So this really is, it's fundamental to fixing what ails us. That and the generational crisis, whereby young people have been locked out of a future, locked out of jobs, saddled with debt, for what ought to be a public right, which is education. It's racial and economic, racial and cultural disparities compounded by generational. As Greens, it needs to be very much in our DNA that we are about fixing that. And that has everything to do, in my experience, with building trust, being there, showing up, understanding that the campaigns need to be coming out of these communities, that they should not you know, be brought to them, they should be coming from them, that we need to be there supporting candidates in those communities. And we're making a real effort to do that in Massachusetts, in Washington, D.C., in Chicago. We have really exemplary candidates from the Latino and African American community who can articulate the green agenda better than anybody, because they are living the environmental justice agenda, environmental and economic justice agenda. And Sherry Honkala was a really important running mate because she was one of the founders of the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Coalition. So this continues to sort of elevate the profile of the Green Party among the extraordinarily disenfranchised communities who've continued to be very active and really the growing edge of the Green Party right now.
Yeah.
But my voters think that Barack Obama is the champion.
Yes, yeah, okay, great point. Okay. Yeah, it's very hard to argue that with people who believe it, because it's more like an article of faith than a matter of fact. And I personally don't argue that with people. And I also try to be very respectful of Obama and his amazing achievements and his very powerful abilities. You know, he's a very talented orator, spokesperson, everything. He's a very talented, incredible person who's made amazing achievements. And then I try to go on and point out where we've gone over the last 4 years. That while he's he may be just an exemplary father, husband, human being in so many ways, for better or for worse, our policies coming out of that White House are not moving us forward. And in many ways, I try to recite the litany. Whatever issue you look at, we've seen the Obama White House basically embrace the policies of George Bush, and in some ways get even worse. The bailouts for Wall Street, the continued offshoring of our jobs, the expansion of the free trade agreements. Who's leading the charge against Medicare and Social Security? It's continually been the Obama White House. The expansion of these wars for oil, which have no end, and now we've got drone wars going on all over the place, including many that we don't even know about. We're not, who's counting, The attack on immigrant rights, I mean, there's another very difficult conversation, because he says the right thing sometimes, but if you look at the track record, it's horrible. And in his first 3 years, he had deported more people than George Bush did in his entire 8 years of holding office. And this whole draconian secure communities program, which is anything but secure, has been really essentially driven by the Obama White House and is still going full bore. And the supposed, truce and
Monsanto.
Well, Monsanto, to say the least. But even before going to Monsanto, on the resolution for undocumented immigrants, I mean, it looks worse and worse the more details that we hear about it. It's beginning to look again like a guest worker program and a two-tiered citizenship status, basically. And forever deferred, even. At first blush, it was a very deferred kind of citizenship. You had to leave, and then hope that you could get back in line, and by the way, go to the end of the line. Don't matter that it was U.S. policy that forced people to migrate to this country to start with, if they were going to keep their families from starving. NAFTA put 1 million Latin American farmers out of business. So we gave them a choice, starve or migrate. People don't choose to migrate and leave their families and their communities, voluntarily. This is an economic refugee issue. If you want to fix it, repeal NAFTA. Let's create fair trade and real economic development in this country and around the world. NAFTA screwed working people in this country and screwed working people across the border. That's how we solve it. It's such a charged conversation, though. I don't try to push that on people who are sort of locked in to their thinking about it, but try to find common ground and then try to work with other people in the community who can create this discussion in a much more balanced and rational way than someone outside of the community. But again, I'm finding increasingly people are waking up and they're starting to move, even without being nudged.